everybody, my name's Sarah and this is my channel, So Sarah Sewed. In today's video, I'm excited to share with you everything I made in the month of September. It's been a pretty productive month for me creatively in September, as I have been home pretty much the whole month. We're in lockdown still in Melbourne, and I've also been on school holidays, so I've had a lot of time to sew and I've got a lot done. So I'll start with what I'm wearing today. This is the Stellan Tee by French Navy. It is made in a cotton from Dupes Designs, a very lightweight cotton, which I think goes really well with this pattern. So this is a free pattern and I made a size large in this one. I just like the more relaxed kind of fit. It's a little bit, it's got a good length if I want to wear it with jeans, but when I'm wearing it with my Miller trousers, like today, I like to tuck it in at the front. So that's the Stellan Tee by French Navy, one of my first makes. This is a pattern that comes in sizes from 32-inch bust to 42-inch bust. And the large is a 38.5 bust with a 31 waist and a 40.5 hip measurement. But the finished measurements were 44.5 bust and 40 waist. So my own measurements are 37 bust, about a 32 waist and a 42 hip. So taking into consideration the finished measurements, even though the large size waist and hips were slightly smaller than my own measurements, I knew there'd be plenty of ease, and so I went with the large, and I'm happy with the way this one sits on me. The Dupes Designs cotton jersey is a pretty thin, lightweight jersey. I have seen some people comment on Instagram that they wouldn't buy it again due to how thin it is, but I actually think it really works well as the Stellan Tee, and I only need 1 meter of the fabric. It's very wide, so 1 meter is plenty to make the Stellan Tee with some leftover as well. So I think it's pretty good value when it comes to how fun their prints are. They've got fabulous prints, so I love them, and I think they go really well with this t-shirt. I made 2 Billie Sweatshirts this month. It's a pattern I've made before and I love it. It's by Tilly and the Buttons. And this time I made one in the jumper version and one in the sweater dress length. So I'll show you those. The first one I made is from a May Gibbs French Terry from Spotlight, which I have been loving for a long time. I actually bought this online because we can only do click and collect at this point, and I did not realise that this is not 100% cotton. In my mind, for some reason, I thought that it was. As soon as I collected it, I could feel that it's definitely not. There's polyester in it. It's got quite a sheen to it, and it's just not something I enjoy wearing all that much. I made it anyway, and to be honest, it's not a jumper that I've wanted to reach for a lot. I think there's 2 reasons for it. I think the first one is the fact that it isn't 100% cotton, and so for me it just doesn't have that same comfort as 100% cotton one would. But the other one is something that I was a little bit worried about, and that is that the colours and the design just kind of make me feel like it looks a little bit like sleepwear. So it's very, very pastel-y. I made the balloon sleeves on this one because I was hoping that maybe by adding the puffy sleeves it would look less like pajamas, and I think it does a little bit, but at the same time I'm just still not very drawn to it. Once I had received the fabric and I was like, I need to check that this does not feel like cotton, I went back to the website and it is listed as polyester and cotton, but it doesn't say what the percentages are of each, so I actually don't know, but anyway, it's a bit of fun. I'm hoping that maybe, you know, I might want to reach for it a little bit more just in the evenings when I want an extra layer. Perhaps over the summer holidays it'll be just a nice one to throw over the top of casual clothes, but anyway, that's that one. Now in the Tilly and the Buttons patterns I generally make a size 5, and that's what I did for this one as well. So the Billie jumper comes in a range of sizes 1 to 10, and the size 1 is a bust of 30 inches and a size 10 is a 48 inches. The size 5 is listed as 38 bust, 32 waist and 41 hips, and so that's the one I went with. Matches up pretty closely with my own measurements. So I also made the Billie sweater dress. I bought this fabric from Nera de Hansen. It is 100% cotton, this one. It's another French terry. And when it arrived, I realized that I had a lot of fabric. So the Tilly and the Buttons website says that you need 1.5 meters to make just the jumper. But for the dress, you need more. But for me, I had plenty of material to make the dress with 1.5 meters of the French terry from Nera de Hansen. I think it's about 150 centimeters wide, but also maybe because I used ribbing, separate ribbing, and not the ribbing from the same fabric, that it was plenty. The ribbing I used was from my design, and it was one that I had left over, and it matched perfectly. So I'll show you my Billie sweater dress. So this is my sweater dress, and as I mentioned, I feel like the ribbing that I had left over from my design just works really beautifully with this fabric. This is a Nera de Hansen French terry, and it's designed by Greta Laundy or Laundy, and it's just a beautiful abstract pattern. And so it's got the ribbing at the neckband, the cuffs, and then the hem, and it's got these pockets which are still sticking out from being on the washing line. I really enjoyed making this dress. It was a very familiar pattern to me because I've made the jumper several times. It was a little bit different having the pockets to add in, but the instructions were great, and I enjoyed making it. I think the only thing that I was concerned about in this pattern is the bottom hem. I just felt like it just got a little bit wavy where the ribbing met the dress. And I'll insert a picture so I can sort of show you what I mean. And when I first attached it, I thought, I wonder if this will look less sort of obvious if I add an extra layer of zigzag stitch around the seam line. And I don't think it helped. It might have even made it worse. I'm not quite sure. But I'm sort of hoping that it's the sort of thing that I notice a lot, but other people won't really. We'll see how we go. If it really does start to bother me a lot, I've probably got enough ribbing left to just make another one just a little bit bigger so it doesn't gather as much. Maybe that would help, because in all of my jumper patterns, this has never happened. I don't feel like it's had this obvious kind of wavy line around the hemband, but for some reason it happened with the dress. So I'm not sure why. And it's not too annoying at this point, but we'll see how we go with that. I am a big fan of Helen's Closet patterns, and I've made quite a few of her patterns before. And so when she had a recent birthday sale, I snapped up a couple more patterns that I've always been wanting to make, or I've wanted to make recently. So the first one of those was the Gilbert top. I made the View A, which is the cropped length with the tie at the front and the short sleeves. And I made it with a linen that I've had in my stash for a while. I bought this last year thinking I'd make it into a dress, but I never did. But I enjoyed, with this one, I enjoyed playing with the stripes a little bit. So on the front pocket, I have done horizontal stripes, and again at the back yoke, I've done horizontal stripes as well. I'll insert some pictures of me wearing it so you can get more of an idea. The Gilbert top comes in sizes from 0 up to 30, with the full bust measurement for size 0 being 31 inches and the full bust measurement for size 30 being 58 inches. I went for a size 12 in the B cup size range for this one. The measurements for that are full bust of 38 inches, a waist of 30 inches, and hips 40 inches. So again, the waist and the hips are a little bit smaller than mine, but the full bust is just slightly bigger than mine, and that's where I prefer to have a bit of room. And I knew there'd be a fair bit of ease around the waist and hips anyway. I'm really happy with the sizing for this one. And the buttons I used were just really simple, clear buttons that I got from Button Mania, my local button shop. It's a intermediate pattern listed by Helen on her website, and it had a lot of steps. So it was definitely more complicated than some of her other patterns that I've made, like the York Pinafore or the Ashton top. But very, very achievable because of how clearly she writes her pattern instructions. I really enjoyed it. I was having to think about what makes these patterns so good and easy to understand what makes these so fun. And I thought of something. I'm not sure if it's exactly, you know, the answer, but I think one of the things she does really, really well is she breaks steps down into the tiniest steps. So an example of one of her instructions might be press the seam down, and that's it. All right, so very, very achievable, and you feel like, oh, that's easy, I can do that step. And then of course, then you look to the next one, and again, it's yet another small step, and just everything just seems so achievable and broken down into such small steps that it's very addictive, and you just want to keep going, and you think, oh, the next step's okay, I can do that too, and so on and so on. Are you okay there? Okay. One of the other things I love about Helen's Closet Patterns is that she uses 5/8 seam allowances most of the time. So for someone like me who doesn't have an overlocker, that does mean that it's easier for me to make French seams where I can. So I will just put my my pieces wrong sides together for the first seam at 1/4 inch, and then I'll maybe trim it down a tiny bit, fold it over, and then do the next seam at 3/8 of an inch, giving me that final 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then having a really nice clean finish on the inside. I often do use a zigzag seam allowance, but just having those French seams just gives me a little bit more confidence that the garment will, you know, last the test of time, because you don't have any of those sort of raw seams or even sort of zigzag seams that might become a little bit frayed. One of my sewing goals for 2021 was becoming more confident in sewing buttonholes into my garments. I was terrified of them at the start of the year, and I have to admit I have kind of avoided them for most of the year, but this month I've really kind of embraced the challenge, and making the Gilbert top forced me to make the buttonholes, and then I followed it up with 2 more button-down tops to really sort of consolidate and build on that confidence. And I'm feeling much better about them now. So the top that I made after the Gilbert top was the Anthea Blouse by Anna Allen Patterns. I absolutely love this top. It is a beautiful shape, just a very simple bodice with big voluminous puffed sleeves. There are 2 different lengths of sleeves that you can make, and there's also a dress version. So I made the blouse both times, but one with the longer sleeves and one with the shorter sleeves. There actually isn't a huge amount of difference in the length of the sleeves. It's pretty subtle. So I'll show you the first one. This one I made in a Rifle Paper Company cotton fabric. I bought directly from Rifle Paper Company. I had a voucher that I was given for my birthday earlier this year, and I agonized over what to buy, but this is one of the fabrics that I bought. It's beautiful, and it's actually metallic. I'm not sure if that's coming up on the screen, but there are lots of the gold in the middle of these little flowers is a gold metallic feature. And yeah, so you can see I've made the long sleeves in this one. The Anthea comes in sizes 00 to 22, with the bust measurement for size 00 being a 31 and for the 22 being 48 inches. I went with a size 10 for this one. The size 10 measurements are listed as a 37-inch bust, 30-inch waist, and 40-inch hip. My waist and hip measurements are a bit bigger than that, but the bust is pretty much spot on. And I had seen from other people who'd made this pattern that it was quite a roomy pattern. I decided that I quite like having that room around the bust, and that there would be plenty of room around the waist and the hip if I just went with the size 10 for this one. So as soon as I'd finished one Anthea blouse, I went and cut out and made another one straight away. So the next one I made was in a cotton dobby by from Darn Cheap Fabrics. So just in a plain sage green color, which is very beautiful. You can see the little dots. I hold that closer to the camera. And this one I made with the shorter sleeves. So there's actually not a huge difference between the long sleeves and the short sleeves in the Anthea blouse. But so probably the short sleeves sort of hit just above my elbow, whereas the longer ones hit just below the elbow. This one's buttons I got from Button Mania, and I was really lucky because I bought them online to be able to find this perfect match button, which is a green little flower button, and it's like a little mirrored button. Not really sure if you can really see that, but I'm really happy with the way that matches. So the Anthea blouse, I've actually already got 2 more fabrics in my stash that are destined to become Antheas, because I love this pattern. It's really, really easy to make, and I think a beautiful shape that I love, and I think it suits me well. I also made a new t-shirt for my 4-year-old son. He loves it when I sew for him, and he loves choosing the fabrics that he would like to have me sew with for him. So I let my son choose the fabric. It's a cotton elastane, and it's just these colourful dragons and castles and clouds and flowers on a blue background, and he loves it. So I made a t-shirt that I've made before. It's called the crew neck t-shirt number 24 by Brindille and Twig, and it comes in sizes 0 to 3 months up to size 5 to 6. And he's 4, nearly 5 years old, but he's on the small side of a 4-year-old kind of size, and so the 4 to 5 size fits him really well. So I made the t-shirt the short sleeve version this time. I've made the long sleeve version before, but coming into warmer months, the short sleeve will get a lot of use, and it gets worn basically every time it comes out of the wash. He wants to wear it again. The one thing I will say about this pattern is it's got a very odd construction order. So it asks you to put the neckband in very last, which I thought it just was quite awkward to have to try and insert that when everything else is sewn up. So when I make this pattern again in the future, which I'm sure I will, I would just insert the neckband after the shoulder seams are sewn up, just so that it's flat and it's much easier to get into that little space as I'm trying to attach the neckband. I made another detachable collar this month. It's a free pattern by Tilly and the Buttons, and it is just a nice way to add a little bit of colour to a simple outfit. So like last month, I used a fat quarter. The pattern piece for the collar does not actually fit on a fat quarter, so you need to do some creative cutting. So in my case, I actually decided to add a seam. I wanted to use this beautiful Rifle Paper Company fabric that's got, you know, it's kind of jungle scenery and some birds on it. And I wanted to make sure I had a bird at each little center section. So that was the most important thing to me. And then I just have a couple of seam lines at the back here, which you can't really even see. So having trouble even just finding them there. So we've got a diagonal one here, and then a straight one down there. You really can't see them, and so I'm happy with that. So if you are going to make this pattern and you've got some fat quarters you'd like to use, it definitely can be done, but you do need to be aware that you'll probably have some seams if you want to cut on the grain line. If you don't want to cut on the grain line, you can probably make it with a fat quarter, and you don't need to worry about it. So if your pattern's not directional, it doesn't matter so much, but if it is directional like this one, you will need to probably have some seams in there. And the last thing I finished this month was the quilt that I sent over to my sister, who has just had a new baby girl. I made the Maizie Quilt by Penelope Handmade, and I actually pieced it in August, but in September I did all the quilting and added the binding to it. I'm really happy with the way it came out, and I know it is loved by my sister and her little baby. So I was very happy to see some photos of her enjoying it already. It has arrived safely in Hong Kong, which I was thrilled about. I decided to buy the binding rather than make my own for this quilt. I would have made some if I had enough fabric that I felt like was a good match, but I really didn't. So I bought some pre-made binding from Scribbly Gum Quilt Company, which is where I bought all the fabrics for this quilt. This one is a Bessie Pearl pre-made binding. Hard to see that. And I think this one is the colour Desert Green, and that fit in really, really nicely with the quilt. I thought when it came to the actual quilting of the pattern, I just decided to do very simple diagonal lines through each of the triangles in both directions, which I think, you know, looks simple and effective. So I'm happy with that. So that brings me to the end of all of my makes for September. I was very busy with those because I was pretty much not busy with anything else. So that was how I managed to be so productive with my makes. Thank you so much for hanging around to the end of the video. I love reading your comments, so if you have a favorite of my makes today or any questions, please drop a comment below. All of the patterns that I use will be in the description box. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and perhaps subscribing to my channel. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you for watching.